There is a single question that separates the amateur investor from the master. It is the dividing line between a portfolio that struggles for every percentage point and one that compounds effortlessly, relentlessly, year after year. It is a question that cuts through the noise of market forecasts, the chatter of quarterly earnings reports, and the dizzying complexity of financial models. It is a question that Warren Buffett, the most successful investor in human history, has used as his primary North Star for over half a century. And the question is this: if you had to, could you raise the price of your product or service tomorrow by 10% and have it stick? Could you do it without losing a significant number of your customers to a competitor? If the answer is yes, you have found a truly wonderful business. If the answer is no, you are looking at a fundamentally difficult one. This, in its purest form, is the concept of pricing power. It is not just one of a dozen metrics to consider. It is the single most important factor in evaluating the long-term merit of a business. It is the ultimate sign of a durable competitive advantage, the financial equivalent of a deep, alligator-filled moat surrounding an impenetrable castle. A low stock price can be a trap. High growth can be a mirage. But the simple, enduring ability to charge more for your product tomorrow than you did today, and to do it again the year after and the year after that, is the most potent engine of wealth creation ever devised. It is the secret ingredient that allows an investment to become an inflation-proof compounder, a tireless machine working to build your wealth, protecting you from the erosion of currency and the chaos of competition. Forgetting this principle is perhaps the most costly mistake in the world of finance. It's the mistake that lures investors into commodity businesses, into brutal price wars where margins are shaved to the bone and survival, not prosperity, is the goal. It's the siren song of the cheap stock that belongs to a business with no control over its own destiny, a business at the mercy of its customers, its suppliers, and its competitors. Today, we are not just going to talk about this principle. We are going to deconstruct it, piece by piece. We will journey into the mind of Warren Buffett, into the boardrooms where these decisions are made, and into the psychological drivers that make customers happily pay more for one product over another that is functionally identical. This is more than just financial education. It is a fundamental shift in perception. By the end of our time together, you will no longer look at the stock market the same way. You will possess a new lens, a powerful filter that will allow you to instantly distinguish the truly great businesses from the merely mediocre. You will have the key to effective stock picking, the blueprint for quality investing, and the cornerstone for building a portfolio that not only helps you beat the market, but also paves the way toward genuine, lasting financial freedom. Our journey begins not in the sterile environment of a stock exchange, but in the warm, fragrant air of a California candy shop. This is the story of how a box of chocolates taught Warren Buffett one of his most profound lessons about the fortress of brand, and how that brand creates a form of pricing power so potent it can feel like magic. In 1972, Warren Buffett and his partner, Charlie Munger, were operating through a holding company called Blue Chip Stamps. They were on the hunt for businesses to buy outright, and a peculiar opportunity crossed their desk: See's Candies. On the surface, it seemed unimpressive. It was a family-owned chain of candy shops, concentrated primarily in California. The numbers were decent, but not spectacular. The asking price was $30 million, which the seller, the See family, later reduced to $25 million. For Buffett and Munger, who had been trained in the strict school of Benjamin Graham's value investing, this price was steep. They calculated the company's tangible assets, the factories, the stores, the inventory, and found they were worth only about $8 million. The seller was asking for a $17 million premium for something they couldn't even see or touch: the goodwill, the brand name. Buffett's initial instinct was to walk away. Paying more than 3 times the value of the physical assets for a candy company seemed like a violation of every principle he held dear. But Charlie Munger, ever the catalyst, pushed him to think differently. Munger had lived in California. He had seen the phenomenon of See's Candies firsthand. He saw the long lines at Christmas and Valentine's Day. he saw the reverence with which people treated the iconic black and white box. He understood that See's wasn't just selling chocolate, it was selling nostalgia, trust, and the feeling of giving a premium, can't-miss gift. He urged Buffett to consider the intangible value. So they dug deeper. They discovered the story of Mary See, a formidable Canadian woman who, after her husband's death, moved to California with her son Charles in the 1920s. Using her own cherished recipes, they opened a small shop that embodied old-fashioned values of quality and service. That ethos had been preserved for 50 years. The brand was built not on flashy advertising, but on a multi-generational promise of excellence. Customers who had gone to See's as children were now taking their own grandchildren. This wasn't just a transaction, it was a tradition. The crucial insight came when they analyzed the company's financial history. For years, See's had been able to raise its prices consistently, every single year, without any negative impact on its sales volume. The price of a pound of See's chocolates would go up by 10 or 15 cents, and people would just pay it. There was no outrage, no mass defection to cheaper brands like Russell Stover. The customer loyalty was immense. This was pricing power in its purest form. Buffett realized what they were buying wasn't just factories and inventory. They were buying a small piece of their customers' minds. They were buying a permanent, unassailable position in the hearts of millions of Californians. That real estate, the mental real estate, was infinitely more valuable than any physical store. Against his Graham-like instincts, he agreed to the $25 million purchase. It would go on to become one of the most important investments of his career, not just for the money it made, but for the lesson it taught. Over the next few decades, See's Candies became what Buffett called the prototype. It was the perfect business model. It required very little in the way of new capital investment. The recipes were the same, the boxes were the same. But with each passing year, as inflation ticked up, as the brand became even more entrenched, they could nudge the price a little higher. That incremental revenue from the price increase was almost pure profit. It dropped directly to the bottom line. The $25 million they invested was returned to them in just a few years, but the cash didn't stop. See's became a gusher of capital. It has since generated over $2 billion in pre-tax earnings for Berkshire Hathaway, all from that initial $25 million investment. It was an engine of wealth that used the power of its brand to convert small price hikes into enormous streams of cash, which Buffett could then use to invest in other great businesses. The See's Candies acquisition was the critical turning point that shifted Buffett's focus from buying fair businesses at wonderful prices to buying wonderful businesses at fair prices. And the primary determinant of a wonderful business, he learned, was this untouchable, unassailable power to price its product based not on its cost, but on its value in the customer's mind. What Buffett and Munger stumbled upon with See's Candies is a profound psychological principle that governs a huge swath of human economic behavior, the affect heuristic. This is a cognitive shortcut our brains use to make decisions quickly and efficiently. Instead of performing a detailed, rational analysis of a product's features and costs, we often base our judgment on the emotion or affect we associate with it. When a customer thinks of See's Candies, they don't consciously calculate the price per ounce of chocolate versus a competitor. Their brain accesses a web of positive feelings: nostalgia for childhood, the joy of giving a gift, the assurance of quality, the warmth of tradition. The decision to buy is driven by this positive emotional tag, not a spreadsheet. The price becomes a secondary, almost irrelevant piece of data. This emotional fortress is what creates brand value, and it's incredibly difficult for a competitor to breach. A new company could source better cocoa beans, build a more efficient factory, and drastically undercut See's on price, and they would still fail to capture the loyal See's customer. Why? Because they cannot replicate the 50 years of positive emotional experiences stored in the customer's brain. They are not just competing on product, they are competing on memory. This ties into another powerful bias: brand association. Our minds work by creating connections. For decades, the See's brand has been deliberately and consistently associated with high-quality ingredients, trustworthiness, and special occasions. When Valentine's Day comes around, the male consumer, in particular, faces a high-stakes decision. The goal is not to get the best value chocolate. The goal is to successfully execute a social ritual and demonstrate affection. Buying a generic brand from a drugstore introduces risk. What if it tastes cheap? What if it sends the wrong message? The See's box, by contrast, is a guaranteed success. It signals thought, care, and a willingness to pay for quality. The premium price isn't a deterrent, it's actually part of the product's value proposition. It reinforces the idea that this is a special gift. Paying more provides the buyer with emotional insurance against making a social blunder. This is a key insight for quality investing. The most powerful brands don't just sell a product, they sell a feeling, an identity, or a solution to an emotional problem. Think of Nike. People pay $180 for a pair of sneakers, not because the rubber and fabric are objectively worth that much, but because they are buying into the idea of athletic excellence, of just do it. They are associating themselves with Michael Jordan and Serena Williams. The brand is a vessel for aspiration. A retail investor can see this principle at play everywhere. Why can Apple charge a significant premium for its iPhones when a dozen competitors offer devices with similar or even superior technical specifications? Because Apple doesn't just sell a phone, it sells simplicity, elegance, creativity, and a seamless ecosystem. The brand has a powerful affect heuristic. People feel good using Apple products. That feeling overrides a purely rational price comparison. This psychological moat is the engine of pricing power. It makes demand for the product inelastic, meaning that demand doesn't change significantly when the price changes. For a business with an inelastic demand curve, small price increases have an almost magical effect on profitability, a concept we will explore in the Financial Connection. For the average person, this seems like irrational behavior. But for the savvy investor or entrepreneur, understanding and identifying this irrationality is the key to spotting a business that can defy economic gravity. So how can you, as a retail investor or an entrepreneur, translate this powerful theory into a practical tool for stock picking and business analysis? How do you systematically identify the intangible fortress of brand value that grants this incredible pricing power? Here is a 4-step mental model, a blueprint you can apply to any company you are evaluating. Let's call it the Brand Moat Blueprint. Step 1 is the annoyance and disappearance test. Ask yourself this simple but profound question. If this company and its products vanished from the earth tomorrow, how many people would be genuinely upset and significantly inconvenienced? Would their lives be materially worse? If Coca-Cola disappeared, there would be a global outcry. If your local generic cola brand disappeared, it would be replaced on the shelf the next day, and no one would notice. If the iPhone disappeared, millions of people would feel a sense of genuine loss and disruption. If a generic Android handset maker vanished, its customers would simply buy a different one. The higher the level of annoyance, outrage, and genuine loss your hypothetical disappearance causes, the stronger the brand and the greater the pricing power. This test cuts through the noise of market share and revenue figures and gets to the heart of the customer relationship. A business that would be deeply missed is a business that has built a real connection, and that connection is the foundation of pricing power. Step 2 is the gifting and status test. This is particularly potent for consumer products. Ask, is this a product or brand that people are proud to give as a gift? The act of giving is fraught with social risk, and people overwhelmingly choose brands that signal quality, care, and status to mitigate that risk. You give a box of See's candies, not a bag of generic chocolate. You give a Tiffany bracelet, not an unbranded piece of jewelry. You give a bottle of Dom Pérignon, not a generic sparkling wine. Brands that are go-to choices for gifts have passed a critical social test. They have become signifiers of quality in the collective consciousness. This status allows them to command premium prices because, as we discussed, the price itself becomes part of the message. In the business-to-business world, this can be reframed as the "nobody ever got fired for buying IBM" test. Does choosing this brand signal good judgment and reduce career risk for the decision-maker? If so, it has pricing power. Step 3 is the price history and inflation test. This requires a little bit of research, but it is the most quantitative part of the blueprint. Go back 10 or even 20 years. Track the price of the company's core product. For a company like Hershey's, you can track the price of a standard milk chocolate bar. For Starbucks, the price of a tall latte. Now plot that price history against the official rate of inflation, the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. A truly great brand with pricing power will show a price history that not only keeps up with inflation but consistently exceeds it. They are not just passing on their increased costs. They are actively increasing their real, inflation-adjusted prices over time. If a company has been unable to raise its prices faster than inflation, it signals a weak competitive position. They are a price taker, not a price maker. This simple analysis is one of the most effective ways to separate businesses with genuine brand value from those that are merely treading water. Step 4 is the qualitative language analysis. Go beyond the numbers and immerse yourself in the language customers use to talk about the brand. Read online forums like Reddit, customer reviews, and social media comments. Are customers defending the brand against critics? Do they use words like love, trust, or essential? Do they tell personal stories about their experiences with the product? This is the voice of a powerful brand. Compare the language used to describe an Apple product, magical, intuitive, changed my life, to the language used for a budget PC. Good value, gets the job done, decent specs for the price. The first is the language of emotion and identity. The second is the language of utility and compromise. The business that evokes the language of love is the business that can raise its prices, and its customers will thank them for the privilege. By applying this 4-step blueprint, you move beyond simple financial metrics and begin to perform a true qualitative analysis of a company's competitive advantage. It's a framework that helps you identify the invisible fortress that Buffett saw in a simple box of chocolates, the kind of business that can become the cornerstone of a portfolio designed for long-term growth. To truly appreciate the strategic genius of focusing on pricing power, we must dedicate time to exploring the opposite path, the path trodden by the overwhelming 99% of businesses and investors. This is the path of the commodity, the world of brutal price competition, the race to the bottom. It is the antithesis of the See's Candies model, and understanding it is crucial for appreciating why Buffett's insight is so transformative. Let's imagine a company, we'll call it Generic Chocolates Inc. They decide to enter the candy market. They see the high margins of companies like See's and think, I can do that for less. They source their cocoa from the same regions. They build a modern, efficient factory. They design a perfectly acceptable, if uninspired, box. Their core business strategy, their entire reason for being, is to offer a product that is just as good but cheaper. On the surface, this seems like a viable strategy. In the world of perfect economic theory, consumers are rational actors who will always choose the lower-priced option for an equivalent good. But, as we know, the real world is a messy, emotional place. Generic Chocolates Inc. gets its product onto the shelves of a major supermarket. It's placed right next to See's Candies. A customer comes along, planning to buy a gift for a dinner party. They see the See's box for $25 and the Generic Chocolates box for $18. What happens? The vast majority of the time, they will still choose See's. The $7 saving is not worth the risk of showing up with a gift that might be perceived as cheap or thoughtless. The customer isn't buying chocolate, they are buying social insurance. Now, consider a different customer, one who is just buying chocolate for themselves. They might be more price sensitive. They might try the generic brand. Perhaps they even like it. But their loyalty is non-existent. Their entire relationship with the brand is based on its price advantage. The moment another company, Super Generic Chocolates LLC, comes along and offers a similar product for $17, that customer will switch without a second thought. Generic Chocolates Inc. has no moat. It has no brand loyalty. It has zero pricing power. In fact, it has negative pricing power. It is completely at the mercy of its competitors and its customers. Now, let's look at the operational nightmare this creates. The price of cocoa beans spikes by 20% due to a bad harvest. A premium brand like C's can absorb some of this cost and pass the rest on to its loyal customers with a price increase, likely expanding their margins in the process. What can Generic Chocolates Inc. do? If they raise their price, they destroy their only competitive advantage. Their price-sensitive customers will flee. So they are forced to eat the entire cost increase, and their already thin profit margins vanish or turn into losses. They are trapped. This is the fate of all businesses that compete solely on price. They are on a treadmill, running faster and faster just to stay in the same place. They are forced to constantly seek out cheaper labor, cheaper materials, and more efficient processes, not to get ahead, but simply to survive. This is why investing in commodity businesses is so dangerous for the retail investor. You might be tempted by a company that produces something essential, like steel, corn, or basic memory chips. The stock might look cheap on a price-to-earnings basis, but these companies have no control over the price of their product. The price of steel is set by the global market, not by the executives of a single steel company. They are price takers. When the market is good, they make money. When the market turns, they face devastating losses. Their fate is determined by massive macroeconomic forces far beyond their control. This is the path of the 99%. It's the path of endless competition, margin pressure, and fragility. Entrepreneurs who build businesses on being the cheapest option are building castles on sand. Investors who buy into these businesses are making a bet on a horse that is perpetually running uphill in a race it can never truly win. The lesson is profound. A low price is not a competitive advantage. It is the absence of a competitive advantage. It is a signal of a bad business, not a good one. The real prize, the key to long-term investing and sustainable success, lies in building and identifying businesses that have earned the right to be expensive. The ultimate test of any investment principle is its direct, quantifiable impact on the financial statements. The concept of pricing power is not an abstract academic idea. It is a powerful force that visibly sculpts a company's income statement and balance sheet, creating a financial profile that is radically different from a business trapped in a commodity market. Let's make this tangible. Imagine two companies, both with $100 million in annual revenue. Company A is Brand Fortress, our C's Candies-like business with immense pricing power. Company B is Commodity Corp., our Generic Chocolates Inc., which competes solely on price. Brand Fortress has high margins because of its brand value. Let's say its cost of goods sold, COGS, the direct costs of making its product, is $30 million. This gives it a gross profit of $70 million, a handsome 70% gross margin. Commodity Corp., in its race to the bottom, has to keep prices low. Its COGS are $85 million, leaving a gross profit of only $15 million, a razor-thin 15% gross margin. Now, an inflationary period hits. The cost of raw materials, labor, and shipping increases by 10% for both companies. For Brand Fortress, its COGS increase by 10% of $30 million, which is $3 million. Its new COGS are $33 million. For Commodity Corp., its COGS increase by 10% of $85 million, an $8.5 million hit. Its new COGS are $93.5 million. Here is where the magic of pricing power appears. The management of Brand Fortress decides to raise its prices. They are confident in their brand moat. To cover the cost increase and expand their margins, they increase prices by a modest 8%. Their revenue climbs to $108 million. Now look at their new profit calculation. $108 million in revenue minus $33 million in COGS equals a new gross profit of $75 million. Their profit didn't just stay the same. It grew by $5 million during an inflationary crisis. They used inflation as a shield to become even more profitable. Now consider the predicament of Commodity Corp. Their costs went up by $8.5 million. Can they raise prices by 8%? Absolutely not. Their price-sensitive customers would vanish. They might try to pass on a small 2% price increase, just to stop the bleeding. Their revenue might inch up to $102 million. Their new profit is $102 million in revenue minus $93.5 million in COGS, which equals a gross profit of only $8.5 million. Their profits have been nearly cut in half. They have been decimated by the exact same economic conditions that Brand Fortress thrived in. This is the direct financial connection. Pricing power creates high and stable gross margins. It allows a business to pass on rising costs and then some, leading to profit growth even in inflationary times. But the effect is even more profound. Think about capital investment. Commodity Corp is always under pressure to become more efficient. They have to constantly spend money on new machinery and technology to shave a fraction of a penny off their costs. This is capital intensive. That $8.5 million in profit they made, it will probably have to be reinvested back into the business just to stay competitive. Brand Fortress, on the other hand, doesn't need much new capital. The brand, its main asset, is self-sustaining. The $75 million in profit it generates is what Buffett calls owner earnings. It is free cash flow that can be returned to shareholders through dividends and buybacks, or be used to acquire other great businesses, fueling the cycle of portfolio growth. This is how See's Candies, with its tiny base of tangible assets, became a financial engine for Berkshire Hathaway. The cash it produced wasn't needed to upgrade chocolate-making technology. It was free to be deployed elsewhere. When you learn to read financial statements through this lens, you are practicing a higher form of stock analysis. Don't just look at the revenue growth, look at the gross margin trend. Is it high and expanding? That's a sign of pricing power. Look at the capital expenditures. Is the company constantly spending huge sums just to stand still? That's a sign of a tough, commodity-like business. This financial clarity is the key to building an inflation-proof investing strategy and achieving the kind of wealth management that leads to true financial freedom. You are no longer just buying stocks. You are buying businesses with a powerful, built-in economic engine. The power of a brand is an incredible force, but it's not the only source of pricing power. There is another, perhaps even more durable form of competitive advantage that allows a company to raise prices with near impunity. This is the power that comes from being utterly indispensable. It's the pricing power that arises when a product or service is so deeply woven into the fabric of a customer's life or a business's daily operations that the cost of switching to an alternative is prohibitively high. This creates a captive audience. And for a savvy investor, identifying these businesses is like finding a private toll road on the information superhighway. Our foundational anecdote for this pillar of indispensability takes us back to one of the most frightening moments in Wall Street history and one of Buffett's most audacious investments. The year was 1963. The company was American Express, and the crisis was known as the Salad Oil Scandal. At the time, American Express was primarily known for its traveler's checks and its iconic charge card, but it had a lesser-known and far less glamorous division involved in warehousing. This division would inspect a company's inventory and then issue warehouse receipts against it, which that company could then use as collateral for loans. One of their biggest clients was the Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Refining Corporation, run by a charismatic fraudster named Tino DeAngelis. DeAngelis had devised a brilliant scheme. He would fill giant storage tanks mostly with water, with only a thin layer of valuable salad oil floating on top. When the American Express inspectors came, they would measure from the top and certify the entire tank as full of oil. DeAngelis used these fraudulent receipts to secure massive loans. When the fraud was finally discovered, Allied Crude collapsed, leaving its lenders with tanks of worthless water and over $60 million in losses, a colossal sum at the time. Because American Express had certified the inventory, the market assumed they would be on the hook for the entire amount. Panic erupted. American Express stock, which had been trading at over $60 a share, plummeted to $35. Wall Street sentiment was that the scandal would bankrupt the company, that the damage to its reputation for trust and integrity would be fatal. This is when a 33-year-old Warren Buffett, running his small investment partnership in Omaha, saw not a crisis, but an extraordinary opportunity. He understood that the market was making a classic mistake. It was confusing a temporary, albeit large, problem in a peripheral division with a fatal blow to the company's core business. Buffett didn't rely on Wall Street reports. He did his own primary, on-the-ground research. He began visiting restaurants and travel agencies. He would talk to the cashiers and managers. He asked them if they were still accepting American Express cards and traveler's checks. He observed customers. He went to banks and talked to the tellers, asking if they had seen any drop-off in the use of American Express products. What he discovered was astounding. Despite the screaming headlines about the salad oil scandal, absolutely nothing had changed in the real world. Diners were still confidently slapping their green cards on the table. Travelers still preferred the security of American Express travelers' checks over carrying cash. Businesses still saw the American Express logo in their window as a sign of prestige, attracting high-spending customers. Buffett realized that the market was completely misjudging the situation. The American Express brand and its products were not just a convenience. They were indispensable to their core customers. The franchise was intact. The scandal, while costly, was a one-time event that had no bearing on the fundamental value of the company's primary operations. He concluded that the competitive advantage of American Express was so powerful that it could easily withstand the financial hit and the temporary reputational damage. Convinced of his analysis, Buffett made one of the boldest moves of his early career. He invested 40% of his partnership's entire capital into American Express stock, buying it up at its depressed prices. It was a massive, concentrated bet. Within 2 years, as the company settled the salad oil claims for less than feared and the market realized the core business was stronger than ever, the stock price tripled. Buffett's partnership made a fortune. This story is the ultimate illustration of pricing power born from indispensability. American Express had built a closed-loop system between cardholders and merchants that was incredibly powerful. Customers loved the convenience and status of the card. Merchants accepted the card, despite the high fees they had to pay, because they couldn't afford to turn away the affluent customers who used it. This created a network effect that was nearly impossible for a competitor to replicate. And because they were so indispensable to both sides of the transaction, American Express had enormous power to set its prices, the annual fees for cardholders, and the discount rates for merchants, and to raise them over time. The salad oil scandal was a test by fire, and it proved that the company's true value wasn't in a warehouse of salad oil, but in its unshakable position in the daily commercial lives of its customers. The American Express story reveals a set of deep-seated psychological principles that create the economics of indispensability. The most powerful force at play is the concept of switching costs. Switching costs are not just the monetary expenses involved in changing from one product or service to another. They are also the psychological, procedural, and effort-based costs. Our brains are inherently lazy and prefer to stick with what is familiar. This is a cognitive bias known as the status quo bias. We have a tendency to prefer that things stay the same, and we will often choose to stick with a decision we've already made, even if it's no longer the optimal one. High switching costs exploit this bias to the extreme. Think about your personal bank. You could probably find another bank that offers a slightly higher interest rate on your savings account, or lower fees. The monetary benefit of switching might be a few $100s a year. So why don't more people do it? Because the switching costs are enormous. You would have to change your direct deposit, update all your automatic bill payments, get a new debit card, learn a new online banking interface, and transfer all your funds. The perceived hassle, time, and risk of something going wrong are so high that most people simply stay with their current bank, even if they are not entirely happy with it. This grants the bank a degree of pricing power. They can introduce a new monthly fee or fail to raise their interest rates in line with competitors, and most of their customers will simply accept it because the alternative is too much of a pain. This principle is even more powerful in the business-to-business world. Consider a company like Autodesk, which makes AutoCAD software for architects and engineers. An architectural firm doesn't just buy the software, they build their entire workflow around it. Their staff spends years training on it. All their past project files are stored in its proprietary format. The software is integrated with their other systems. For that firm to switch to a competing software provider, even one that is cheaper or has better features, would be a monumental task. They would have to retrain their entire staff, convert decades of archival files, and redesign all of their internal processes. The switching costs are astronomical. Therefore, Autodesk has incredible pricing power. Each year, they can raise the price of their software licenses, and their customers have little choice but to pay. The service has become indispensable. This leads to another related concept: data entrapment. The more of your personal or business data a company holds, the harder it is for you to leave. Apple's ecosystem is a masterclass in this. Your photos, messages, music, contacts, and passwords are all seamlessly integrated through iCloud. Leaving the Apple ecosystem means losing or painstakingly migrating this digital life you have built. The convenience of staying is so high, and the pain of leaving is so great that Apple can command a premium price for its hardware, knowing its customers are locked in. A retail investor searching for quality investing opportunities can look for these signs of stickiness. Is the company's product deeply integrated into its customers' daily habits, or critical business operations? Does the company become a custodian of its customers' valuable data? If the answer is yes, you are likely looking at a business with a powerful hidden moat and the pricing power that comes with it. The status quo bias ensures that once a customer is in, they are likely to stay in, creating a predictable, recurring revenue stream that is highly attractive from an investment standpoint. How can you, the diligent investor or entrepreneur, systematically identify businesses that profit from the economics of indispensability? You need a practical framework to spot high switching costs and the pricing power they create. Here is a 4-part blueprint, the indispensability audit, to guide your stock analysis. First is the workflow integration audit. This step requires you to think like a user of the product or service, particularly in a business context. Ask, does this product become a fundamental part of the customer's daily operations? Does it move from being a tool they use to the platform on which they work? We mentioned Autodesk for architects. Another prime example is Intuit, the maker of QuickBooks. For millions of small businesses, QuickBooks isn't just accounting software. It is their accounting department. It holds all their historical financial data, processes their payroll, manages their invoices, and is the system their external accountant is familiar with. Tearing QuickBooks out of a business would be like performing open-heart surgery. A company that achieves this level of workflow integration has immense pricing power. They can transition to a subscription model and raise prices annually, and their customers will pay because the alternative is operational chaos. Look for companies whose products are not just bought, but are deeply times-implemented dives. Second is the data entrapment analysis. In the modern economy, data is the ultimate sticky asset. Ask, how much of the customer's valuable, proprietary, or personal data is stored within this company's system? A great example is Salesforce. It is the central nervous system for the sales departments of countless companies. It holds every customer lead, every sales interaction, and all of the company's sales forecasts. The value of the data stored in Salesforce far exceeds the cost of the software subscription. A competitor could offer a similar tool for half the price, but migrating years of critical sales data is a risky and complex proposition. Therefore, Salesforce can confidently raise its prices, knowing its customers are effectively locked in by their own data. When analyzing a company, assess the gravity of the data it holds. The heavier the data, the stronger the moat. Third is the network effect mapping. A network effect occurs when a product or service becomes more valuable to each user as more people use it. This creates a powerful competitive advantage and makes the service indispensable. The classic examples are credit card networks like Visa and American Express. The more merchants that accept Visa, the more valuable it is for consumers to have a Visa card. The more consumers who have a Visa card, the more essential it is for merchants to accept it. This virtuous cycle creates a duopoly with MasterCard that is almost impossible for a new entrant to break. They can charge fees to both sides of the transaction because the value of the network they provide is immense. When evaluating a business, map out its network. Does value flow from user to user? If so, you are looking at one of the most powerful moats in business, one that naturally leads to immense, long-term pricing power. Fourth and finally, conduct the pain of disconnection thought experiment. This is a qualitative test similar to the one for brands, but focused on utility rather than emotion. Imagine you are a loyal customer of the company. What would be the immediate, tangible, and painful consequences if the service were turned off tomorrow morning? If your electricity provider, a classic regulated monopoly, cuts you off, the pain is immediate and severe. If Microsoft shut off access to its Office suite for a major corporation, work would grind to a halt. If Amazon Web Services went down, a significant portion of the internet would break. The greater the immediate pain of disconnection, the more indispensable the service, and the greater its ability to command higher prices. By applying this four-part audit, you can move beyond a superficial understanding of a business and identify the deep structural advantages that create lasting pricing power. This is the kind of in-depth stock picking that separates successful long-term investors from short-term speculators. It is about finding the businesses that have become so essential that their customers are, for all practical purposes, permanent. To fully grasp the power of indispensability, it is essential to examine its opposite, the world of the easily replaceable. This is the path of the 99% of businesses that offer a service or product with low to non-existent switching costs. It is a world of constant customer churn, cutthroat competition, and zero pricing power. This is the antithesis of the American Express model. Imagine a small business that provides a basic, no-frills web hosting service. Let's call it SimpleHost. They offer a simple value proposition. For $5 a month, they will host your personal website. They attract customers by being one of the cheapest options available. A student who wants to post their resume online or a hobbyist who wants to start a blog might sign up. The service works fine, but what kind of relationship does SimpleHost have with its customers? It's purely transactional. The customer has no deep integration with the service. Their data, a few blog posts and pictures, can be easily downloaded and moved. There is no network effect. The value of the service doesn't increase if more people use it. The pain of disconnection is minimal. If they were to shut down, the customer would be annoyed for an afternoon while they sign up for a nearly identical service from a competitor. Now, let's observe the business dynamics of this environment. SimpleHost is in a constant battle for survival. Its competitors are legion, and they all offer essentially the same thing. The only meaningful way to compete is on price. One day, a new competitor, CheaperHost, enters the market, offering the same service for $4 a month. What happens to SimpleHost's customers? The savvy ones will switch immediately to save $1 a month. To stop the bleeding, SimpleHost is forced to match the $4 price. Their revenue and margins are immediately compressed. Then another competitor comes in at $3.50. This is the race to the bottom in its purest form. SimpleHost has absolutely no pricing power. If they were to raise their price to $6 a month, their churn rate would skyrocket. They are price takers, completely beholden to the prevailing market rate, which is constantly being driven down by new entrants. This dynamic is not limited to the tech world. Think of a generic, non-contract mobile phone carrier. They compete almost entirely on the monthly price and the amount of data they offer. Switching is relatively easy thanks to number portability regulations. As a result, these companies spend enormous amounts of money on advertising and promotions just to lure customers away from their rivals, who are doing the exact same thing. It's a leaky bucket business model. They are constantly spending to acquire new customers just to replace the ones who are leaving for a better deal. This is a crucial lesson for entrepreneurs and investors alike. Entering a market with a Me Too product and trying to compete on price is a recipe for misery. Without creating high switching costs or a powerful brand, you are setting yourself up for a battle you cannot win. For the retail investor, it is a critical red flag. When you analyze a company, look at its customer churn or attrition rate. High churn is a sign of low switching costs and a weak competitive position. Look at their sales and marketing expenses as a percentage of revenue. If they have to spend a fortune constantly acquiring new customers, it often means they are not very good at keeping the ones they have. This is the path of the 99%, building and investing in businesses that are easily replaceable. The path to financial freedom lies in identifying the opposite. The indispensable businesses that have made leaving so painful that their customers become akin to permanent assets. The financial manifestation of indispensability is one of the most beautiful things an investor can find on a company's financial statements. A business with high switching costs and a captive customer base exhibits a financial profile characterized by predictability, high margins, and extraordinary capital efficiency. Let's bring this to life by comparing two hypothetical software companies, both with $100 million in revenue. Our first is Deep Trench Software, a company whose product is deeply integrated into its customers' workflows, creating high switching costs. Our second is Easy Switch Software, whose product is useful but not essential, leading to high customer churn. The most telling metric to start with is what is known in the software industry as Net Revenue Retention, or NRR. This metric measures how much revenue a company keeps from its existing customer base over a year, including upgrades and downgrades. Deep Trench Software, because its customers are locked in and tend to buy more modules over time, might have an NRR of 120%. This means that even if they didn't sign a single new customer all year, their revenue from their existing base would have grown by 20%. This is an incredibly powerful economic engine. Easy Switch Software, on the other hand, is constantly losing customers to competitors. After accounting for the customers who stay and buy a little more, their NRR might be only 80%. This means they start every year in a 20% hole that they have to fill with new sales just to break even. Now let's look at the income statement. Both companies need to grow. To achieve, say, 15% overall revenue growth, Deep Trench needs to find -5% growth from new customers, because its existing base already gave it 20%. In reality, it will still seek new customers, and its total growth will be much higher. Its sales and marketing S&M expense can be relatively low as a percentage of revenue, perhaps 25%, because their customers market for them and stick around forever. Their profit margins will be high. Easy Switch, to get to 15% overall growth, needs to find 35% growth from new customers just to fill their 20% leaky bucket and add 15% on top. This requires a massive S&M budget. They might spend 60% of their revenue on sales commissions and advertising just to tread water. Their profitability will be low or non-existent, even at the same revenue scale. Furthermore, the revenue quality is completely different. Deep Trench's revenue is highly predictable and recurring. This allows for stable cash flows and makes the business far less risky. Analysts will reward this predictability with a much higher valuation multiple. Easy Switch's revenue is unpredictable and non-recurring. The market will view it as low quality and assign it a much lower valuation. This is the direct financial connection. Indispensability, born from high switching costs, manifests as high net revenue retention, lower sales and marketing costs, higher profit margins, and more predictable cash flows. It's a business model that is capital efficient and built for long-term profitable growth. When Buffett saw that people were not abandoning American Express during the salad oil scandal, he was performing a real-world check on their net revenue retention. He saw that the customer base was stable and sticky, and he knew that the underlying economics of the business were sound. For the modern retail investor, you don't have to go door to door. You can look for these metrics in a company's investor presentations and annual reports. Understanding them is a critical part of financial education and a key to spotting the truly superior businesses that can power your portfolio growth for years to come. We have explored the pricing power that springs from an intangible brand and from the tangible stickiness of an indispensable service. Now we turn to a third and perhaps the most absolute source of pricing power, that which is granted by an external authority. This is the world of regulatory moats, where government, either by design or by consequence, creates an environment in which a company is shielded from the harsh winds of competition. This protection can come in the form of an explicit monopoly, a valuable license, or a critical patent, and it can create some of the most profitable and durable businesses on earth. The foundational story for this pillar is not one of Buffett's famous, massive investments, but a smaller, more tactical one that perfectly illustrates the principle: his 1977 purchase of the Buffalo Evening News. To a modern observer, buying a newspaper seems like a terrible investment. But in the 1970s, the economics of the newspaper industry were undergoing a dramatic shift, and Buffett, with his keen eye for competitive dynamics, saw an opportunity that others missed. At the time, many large American cities had 2 or more competing daily newspapers. Buffalo, New York had the Buffalo Evening News, a profitable evening paper, and the Buffalo Courier-Express, a weaker morning paper that also published a Sunday edition. The 2 papers were locked in a fierce battle for advertisers and readers. Buffett recognized a powerful trend sweeping the nation. In city after city, the newspaper business was consolidating into a natural monopoly. The paper with the largest circulation got the most advertising revenue. That revenue allowed it to hire more reporters, produce better content, and invest in better printing and distribution, which in turn attracted more readers. This created a virtuous cycle for the leader and a death spiral for the weaker competitor. Sooner or later, in most markets, one paper would emerge as the sole survivor. The survivor would then own the town. It would become the single, indispensable platform for local advertisers, department stores, car dealerships, grocery stores, to reach the entire community. There was no viable alternative. This geographically enforced, government-tolerated monopoly would grant the surviving newspaper immense pricing power. With this understanding, Buffett bought the Buffalo Evening News. His strategy was aggressive and controversial. To hasten the demise of his competitor, he launched a Sunday edition of the Evening News to directly attack the Courier-Express's most profitable product. The move led to a costly legal battle and several years of financial losses as the 2 papers bled money in a circulation war. Many observers thought Buffett had made a terrible mistake. But he was playing a long game. He knew that these short-term losses were the price of acquiring a priceless asset, a local monopoly. In 1982, his strategy paid off. The Courier-Express, unable to sustain the losses, shut down its operations forever. Overnight, the Buffalo Evening News became the only game in town. And just as Buffett had predicted, its economics were transformed. With its competition eliminated, the newspaper's profitability exploded. It no longer had to compete on advertising rates. It could raise its prices for ad space year after year, and the local businesses had no choice but to pay. The capital required to run the business, the printing presses and buildings, remained relatively fixed, so those price increases flowed almost directly to the bottom line. The newspaper, which he had bought for about $32 million, began generating tens of millions of dollars in pre-tax profit each year. It became another of Berkshire's cash-gushing machines. The Buffalo Evening News story is a masterclass in understanding how an external structure, in this case, the economic reality of a single newspaper town, can function as a regulatory moat. While not a government-granted monopoly in the legal sense, it was a de facto monopoly created by market dynamics. The pricing power wasn't derived from a beloved brand or high switching costs, but from the simple, brutal fact that advertisers had nowhere else to go. Buffett had bought a private toll bridge for information and commerce in the city of Buffalo, and for many years he was able to set the toll. The underlying psychological principle that makes regulatory moats so effective is astonishingly simple: the elimination of choice. Our brains are wired to make comparisons. When we shop for a car, we compare the features, price, and reputation of Ford, Toyota, and Honda. This comparative process puts a natural cap on how much any one company can charge. If Honda raises the price of its Accord by $5,000, its sales will plummet as customers flock to the similar and now much cheaper Toyota Camry. But what happens when there is nothing to compare? What happens when there is only one option? This creates a state of cognitive ease. The difficult, energy-intensive process of weighing alternatives is removed. The decision is no longer, which one should I buy, but simply, should I buy it or not? For a product or service that is essential, the answer is almost always yes. This is the power of a forced choice. Consider your local electric utility. It is a true government-granted monopoly. When you move into a new home, you don't shop around for the best electricity provider. There is only one. You don't analyze their pricing structure or their customer service ratings. You simply call them and set up an account. You have to have electricity. The utility company operates in a world without competition. As a result, its pricing is not determined by market forces, but by a negotiation with a government regulatory commission. While these commissions are supposed to protect consumers, they typically allow the utility to earn a fair, guaranteed profit on its invested capital. This provides a stable, predictable, and low-risk business model with a form of built-in government-sanctioned pricing power. This principle extends to businesses protected by patents. When a pharmaceutical company develops a new life-saving drug, it is granted a patent, which is an exclusive, government-enforced right to sell that drug for a set number of years. For a patient with a specific disease, there is no alternative. The choice is to pay the price the company sets or to go without the treatment. This grants the company absolute pricing power for the life of the patent. They can charge thousands of dollars for a drug that costs only a few dollars to manufacture, because its value is not in its physical components, but in the life-saving outcome it provides. The government has, in effect, eliminated all competition to incentivize the high-risk, high-cost process of drug discovery. An investor who understands this can analyze a pharmaceutical company's pipeline not just for its scientific merit, but for the strength and duration of its patent portfolio. The pricing power exists only as long as the legal protection does. Once a patent expires and generic competitors can enter the market, the price of the drug can fall by over 90% almost overnight. The business transforms from a high-margin monopoly to a low-margin commodity. The psychological effect of a forced choice is subtle but incredibly potent. It shifts the power dynamic entirely from the consumer to the producer. The producer no longer has to persuade the customer that their product is better than the alternative. They only have to exist. For an investor, identifying businesses that operate within these government-sanctioned or geographically enforced arenas is a powerful strategy for finding companies with a durable, long-term competitive advantage. How can you, as a retail investor, systematically hunt for these businesses, fortified by regulatory moats? It requires a different kind of analysis, one that looks beyond the company itself to the legal and competitive landscape it operates in. Here is a four-step blueprint, the gatekeeper's audit for spotting this powerful form of pricing power. First, identify and analyze toll bridge industries. A toll bridge is a business that controls a critical and limited gateway and can charge a fee for passage. This is a powerful mental model for investing. Ask yourself, what industries require a government license, a specific patent, a unique piece of land, or a massive, hard-to-replicate infrastructure network to operate? The classic examples are utilities, airports, and railways. A city can't have 10 competing electrical grids or 5 international airports. The sheer capital cost and physical space required create a natural monopoly, which is then typically regulated by the government. Other examples include waste management companies, which often operate under exclusive long-term contracts with municipalities, or a company that owns a critical port or pipeline. In the world of finance, the credit rating agencies like Moody's and S&P Global function as regulatory toll bridges. Regulations require many types of bonds to have a credit rating, forcing issuers to pay for their service. For entrepreneurs, trying to build a new toll bridge is incredibly difficult, but for an investor, buying a piece of an existing one can be incredibly lucrative. Second, scrutinize companies with deep government entanglements. This goes beyond simple regulation and into the world of government contracts. Look for companies that provide an essential, specialized service to government agencies, particularly in sectors like defense and aerospace. A company like Lockheed Martin, which builds fighter jets, has only one primary customer for that product line: the U.S. government and its allies. This creates a unique dynamic. While the government has immense buying power, the company has a monopoly on a highly complex, mission-critical product. The relationship is symbiotic, and it often leads to long-term, cost-plus contracts that guarantee a level of profitability. Beating the market sometimes involves looking for these unique, non-competitive niches where the rules of capitalism are different. Third, become a student of the patent system. For companies in the pharmaceutical, biotech, and technology sectors, the patent portfolio is one of the most valuable, yet intangible, assets on the balance sheet. Your stock analysis must include an assessment of the company's patents. When do the key patents on their blockbuster products expire? This is known as the patent cliff, and it's a critical date for investors. A company with a strong, long-dated patent on a successful product has a guaranteed monopoly and massive pricing power. A company whose key patents are about to expire is facing a potential collapse in revenue and profit. You should also assess the company's research and development pipeline. Are they creating new, patentable innovations to replace the old ones? A strong R&D engine is the only way to sustain a competitive advantage in these sectors. Fourth, analyze local, not just national, regulations. Sometimes the most powerful moats are small and geographic. Zoning laws can create powerful micro-monopolies. For example, a town might only grant a license for one quarry or one landfill. A gas station or a grocery store might have a local monopoly simply because it is the only one for 50 miles along a major highway. A company that aggregates these local, regulatory-driven monopolies can be a very powerful, under-the-radar investment. This level of granular analysis requires more effort, but it's how you uncover the hidden sources of pricing power that most of the market overlooks. By using the gatekeeper's audit, you can identify businesses that operate in a protected space, insulated from the daily dogfight of competition, allowing them to earn superior returns for their shareholders over the long term. To truly value the serene, predictable profitability of a business with a regulatory moat, we must venture into its polar opposite, the chaotic, hyper-competitive, and unregulated market. This is the world where the 99% of entrepreneurs and investors live and die, a world where there are no gatekeepers, no toll bridges, and no shelter from the storm of competition. It is the antithesis of the Buffalo Evening News monopoly. The quintessential example of this environment is the restaurant industry. Opening a restaurant has incredibly low barriers to entry. You need a kitchen, a dining space, and the proper local permits. There is no national license that limits the number of Italian restaurants that can open in a city. There is no patent on a pasta recipe. As a result, the competition is absolutely brutal. A successful restaurant is immediately swarmed by imitators. A new bistro opens and is a huge hit. Within months, 3 similar concepts will open within a few blocks, all vying for the same customers. The restaurant owner has virtually zero pricing power. If they raise the price of their signature dish by 20%, their customers, who have a dozen other choices for dinner, will simply go elsewhere. They are in a constant battle to justify their price point through food quality, service, and ambiance. Their profit margins are notoriously thin. A slight increase in the price of food supplies or the local minimum wage can be enough to wipe out their profitability for the year. the business is incredibly fragile. A few bad online reviews, a negative article from a local food critic, or a downturn in the local economy can be a death sentence. The failure rate for restaurants is astronomically high for this very reason. There is no durable competitive advantage. The only moat is the quality of the meal you served last night and the reputation you have today, both of which are fleeting and must be re-earned every single day. This is the path of the 99%. It is the experience of most small business owners. They are not bad entrepreneurs. They are simply operating in a structurally deficient industry. They work incredibly hard, but the very nature of their competitive environment puts a hard cap on their potential for success. The investor who falls for the allure of a hot new restaurant chain is often making a grave mistake. They see rising sales and assume it's a great business. But they fail to analyze the underlying structure of the industry. They fail to ask the crucial question: can this business raise its prices without losing customers? For a restaurant, the answer is almost always no. They are on a treadmill, where any success is quickly copied and competed away. This principle applies to countless other industries: retail clothing, basic consulting services, residential construction, and so on. Any business where the barriers to entry are low and the product or service is not highly differentiated is doomed to a life of intense competition and low margins. They are in a constant struggle for survival, not a steady march towards prosperity. Investing in these companies is like swimming against a strong current. It takes a huge amount of effort just to stay in one place. By understanding this antithesis, you can start to appreciate the immense value of a business that has been granted a reprieve from this daily battle. A regulatory moat provides a calm harbor in the turbulent sea of capitalism, allowing a company the peace and stability it needs to generate predictable profits and create lasting value for its shareholders. Avoiding the industries on the path of the 99% is just as important for your long-term investing success as picking the winners. The financial signature of a business operating with a regulatory moat is one of stability, high returns on tangible assets, and consistent cash flow generation. The numbers on the page reflect the lack of competitive pressure in the real world. Let's trace the financial impact directly, using Buffett's Buffalo Evening News as our guide. Before its competitor folded, the newspaper was in a pre-monopoly phase. Let's say it had revenues of $50 million. But to compete with the Courier Express, it had to keep its advertising rates low and its expenses high. It needed a large newsroom to cover every local story, a big advertising sales team to fight for every account, and a robust distribution network. Its operating expenses might have been $48 million, resulting in a pre-tax profit of only $2 million, a meager 4% profit margin. The business was also capital-intensive in a competitive sense. It had to be willing to spend heavily to win the war. Now let's look at the post-monopoly financials. The Courier Express goes out of business. The Buffalo Evening News is now the only game in town for major local advertisers. The management team can now begin to exercise its pricing power. Over the next year, they increase their advertising rates by 15%. Because their advertisers have no other viable option, revenue jumps to $57.5 million. But what happens to their expenses? They might actually go down. They no longer need such an aggressive ad sales team. They can consolidate printing operations. Let's say their operating expenses fall to $46 million. The new pre-tax profit is now $11.5 million. The profit margin has exploded from 4% to 20%. This is the power of a monopoly. But the most important financial metric to look at is the return on tangible assets. A newspaper business requires printing presses, buildings, and vehicles. Let's say the value of these tangible assets was $30 million. In the competitive phase, the business was earning $2 million in profit on a $30 million asset base. That's a 6.7% return, which is not very good. In the monopoly phase, it's earning $11.5 million on that same asset base. The return on tangible assets has skyrocketed to over 38%. This is a wonderful business. It requires very little times new times capital investment, but its earnings power has increased dramatically. That $11.5 million in profit is almost all free cash flow. It's the owner earnings that Buffett could extract from the business each year and use for his other investment activities, a critical component of his wealth management strategy for Berkshire Hathaway. This is the financial profile you should look for as an investor seeking a quality investing opportunity. Look for businesses in protected industries that exhibit expanding profit margins and, most importantly, a high and sustainable return on tangible capital. A company like a railroad or a utility might have to invest enormous amounts of capital in its infrastructure, but if regulation allows it to earn a consistent, fair return on that massive capital base, it can still be a very good investment. The key is that the pricing structure, whether set by the market or by regulators, allows the company to earn profits that are well in excess of its cost of capital. The lesson from the Buffalo Evening News is a profound piece of financial education. The greatest financial returns often come not from the companies that are fighting the hardest, but from the companies that don't have to fight at all. Our exploration of pricing power has so far focused on the virtues of strong brands, indispensable services, and regulatory moats. These are all offensive weapons in a company's arsenal, allowing it to proactively charge more for its products. But there is a concept often confused with pricing power that is, in reality, a far weaker defensive position: the cost advantage. Many business leaders and investors believe that being the lowest cost producer of a good is a durable competitive advantage. The logic seems sound. If you can make something cheaper than anyone else, you can either undercut them on price and gain market share, or you can sell at the market price and enjoy higher margins. For a time, this can work. But as Warren Buffett learned in one of his most painful investment mistakes, a cost advantage is often a fragile and fleeting edge, not a true, long-term moat. This brings us to the cautionary tale of Dexter Shoe Company. In 1993, Warren Buffett made what he would later call the worst deal of his career. He agreed to buy Dexter Shoe, a popular and profitable shoemaker based in Maine, for $433 million. What made the deal particularly catastrophic was that he didn't pay in cash. He paid with Berkshire Hathaway stock. The value of that stock today would be in the billions. Dexter Shoe looked like a great business on the surface. It had a long history, a decent brand in the United States, and, most importantly, it was a well-run, efficient, low-cost producer of American-made shoes. Buffett was impressed by its management and its operations. He believed that its ability to produce quality shoes at a low cost constituted a durable competitive advantage. He thought he was buying a business with a moat. But he had made a critical analytical error. He failed to see that Dexter's moat was, in fact, a tiny, shallow ditch that was about to be obliterated by a global tidal wave. Dexter's cost advantage was real, but it was only an advantage relative to other American shoe manufacturers. In the early 1990s, the global trade landscape was changing rapidly. Developing nations were entering the global marketplace, offering a vast pool of motivated labor at a fraction of U.S. wages. Suddenly, shoe companies could manufacture their products overseas for a price so low that even the most efficient American factory couldn't come close to competing. Dexter's competitive advantage wasn't just eroded, it was rendered completely irrelevant overnight. The company had no real brand power on a global scale that would compel a customer to pay $50 for a pair of Dexter shoes when a similar quality, foreign-made Nike or Reebok shoe was available for $30. They had no unique, patented technology. Their only edge was their domestic manufacturing efficiency, and that edge had vanished. They had zero pricing power. In fact, they faced immense downward pressure on their prices just to stay on the shelves. The business rapidly deteriorated. The profits evaporated, and eventually, the entire operation had to be shut down. The $433 million of Berkshire stock was a complete write-off. Buffett's reflection on this mistake is incredibly insightful. He said, "I made a mistake in assessing the durability of the competitive advantage. Dexter was a fine company with fine people, but it was in the wrong industry. It had no way to protect itself from the low-cost foreign competition." This is the crucial distinction. A cost advantage is about playing defense. It's about being able to withstand price pressure better than your immediate competitors. True pricing power, the kind we saw with See's Candies or American Express, is about playing offense. It's the ability to asterisk dictate prices, to be immune from the price pressure of the broader market. The Dexter shoe saga is a powerful, multi-billion-dollar lesson on the fallacy of mistaking operational excellence for a structural competitive advantage. It teaches us that a moat is only a moat if it can withstand an attack from any direction, not just from the players already inside the castle walls. The psychological trap that ensnared Buffett with Dexter shoe is a common and seductive one: the illusion of control. Dexter's management team was excellent. They had meticulously optimized their supply chain, their factory floor, and their labor practices. They had control over every aspect of their manufacturing process. This deep operational knowledge created a powerful feeling of control over their own destiny. They believed that by running their business better than anyone else in America, they could secure their future. Buffett, in buying the company, bought into this illusion. This is a form of myopia, or short-sightedness. The management team was so focused on their immediate, domestic competitors that they failed to look up and see the much larger, global threat looming on the horizon. They were winning a battle, but they were about to lose the war. This bias is incredibly common in business. A company can become obsessed with fine-tuning its internal processes, believing that efficiency is the key to victory. But operational efficiency is only a durable advantage if it is based on a proprietary process that cannot be copied. If you are simply running a generic factory more efficiently than the guy down the street, your advantage is temporary. Eventually, he will copy your methods, or a new competitor will emerge with an even more efficient factory. This is fundamentally different from the source of power for a brand like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola's advantage is not that they have the most efficient syrup-making process in the world. Their advantage lies in the abstract idea of Coke that exists in the minds of billions of people. That is a proprietary asset that cannot be easily replicated. The Dexter shoes story also highlights the danger of what psychologists call insularity. The company's success had been built over decades in a relatively stable and protected domestic market. This created a corporate culture and a worldview that was unprepared for the radical shift that globalization would bring. They were thinking like a main shoe company, not a global footwear competitor. This is a critical lesson for any retail investor. When you analyze a company, you must resist the seductive story of operational excellence alone. You must ask the harder, more strategic questions. What is the true source of this company's advantage? Is it a structural feature of the business, like a brand, a patent, or a network effect? Or is it merely a temporary operational edge, like a more efficient factory or a short-term lead in technology? A business that relies solely on a cost advantage is on a precarious footing. It is engaged in a constant struggle to maintain its edge, and it is highly vulnerable to disruption from new technologies or new, lower-cost competitors. The illusion of control feels comforting, but the reality is that such a business is not truly in control of its own fate. It is at the mercy of the broader competitive landscape, a landscape that can change with breathtaking speed. How can you, as an investor, arm yourself against this fallacy? How do you build a mental model to differentiate a truly durable moat from a fragile temporary cost advantage? Here is a 4-part checklist, the durability test, to apply to any company that claims its low costs are its competitive advantage. First is the global cost structure analysis. This is the key lesson from Dexter shoe. Do not just compare the company's costs to its immediate domestic rivals. You must ask, can this product or service be produced or delivered significantly cheaper by a competitor in a different country, with a different labor market, a different regulatory environment, or different resource costs? If the answer is yes, the moat is not durable. A US-based furniture manufacturer might be the most efficient in North America, but it is still vulnerable to competition from Vietnam or Mexico. A software development firm based in Silicon Valley might have the best engineers, but it is vulnerable to being undercut by firms in India or Eastern Europe. A true cost advantage in the modern world must be global in nature. Second, you must determine if the advantage is process-based or asset-based. An asset-based advantage comes from owning a unique, hard-to-replicate asset. This could be a patent on a manufacturing technique, ownership of the world's richest mineral deposit, or a superior location. A process-based advantage comes from simply doing things better, a more efficient factory layout, a smarter logistics system. Process-based advantages are generally less durable because processes can be copied. Your competitor can hire your managers, reverse engineer your methods, or buy the same consulting advice you did. A durable cost advantage is almost always rooted in a unique asset that others cannot access. For example, Geico's cost advantage in the insurance industry comes from its direct-to-consumer model, which was a structural innovation that for decades allowed it to avoid paying commissions to agents, a huge cost for its competitors. Third is the customer indifference test. This is a powerful thought experiment. Ask, if a new competitor offered a product that was functionally identical to this company's product, but for 15% less, what would the customers do? If a significant portion of the customer base would switch immediately, then the company has no real moat. It is competing on price, not on value. Its customers are indifferent to the brand or the service, and their loyalty is purely to the lowest price. A company with a true moat, like Apple, can withstand this test. Many competitors offer cheaper smartphones, but Apple's customers stay because they value the ecosystem, the design, and the brand. They are not indifferent. A business whose customers would flee for a 15% discount is living on borrowed time. Fourth and finally, assess the company's technological disruption vulnerability. A cost advantage can be wiped out in an instant by a new technology. A company might have the world's most efficient system for printing books, but that advantage is made obsolete by the invention of the e-reader. A company that has perfected a specific type of industrial manufacturing might be disrupted by the advent of 3D printing. You must always ask, is there a new technology on the horizon that could fundamentally change the cost structure of this entire industry? A business whose cost advantage is tied to an old technology is a melting ice cube, not a solid foundation for an investment. By rigorously applying the durability test, you can avoid the mistake Buffett made with Dexter Shoe. You can learn to distinguish between the temporary success that comes from being a lean operator and the lasting prosperity that comes from a truly unbreachable competitive advantage. This is a critical skill for any long-term investor aiming for superior portfolio growth. The path of the 99% of businesses is the relentless pursuit of cheaper. It's an ideology drilled into us from the first day of business school. Gain a competitive advantage by lowering your cost structure and undercutting your rivals on price. This approach, while seemingly logical, is the antithesis of the pricing power philosophy, and, for most companies, it leads to a brutal, soul-crushing race to the bottom. Let's examine the anatomy of this race. A company enters a market by offering the lowest price. This forces the existing competitors to lower their prices to match, or risk losing market share. This immediately compresses the profit margins for everyone in the industry. To restore some profitability, the companies are now forced to cut costs. This is where the truly destructive behavior begins. The first thing to go is often quality. The company starts using slightly cheaper raw materials, removing a feature that was expensive to produce, or reducing the level of customer service. The product gets a little bit worse, but the price is maintained. Then, the pressure moves to the employees. Wages are squeezed, benefits are cut, and training programs are eliminated. The workforce becomes demoralized and less effective, which further impacts quality and innovation. The company stops investing in long-term research and development because it cannot afford to think beyond the next quarter's results. All capital and all mental energy are focused on one thing: shaving another fraction of a cent off the cost of production. The business becomes fragile and brittle. Because its margins are so thin, it has no cushion to absorb shocks. A sudden increase in the price of raw materials can push it into bankruptcy. A new regulation that increases compliance costs can be a fatal blow. A recession that reduces demand can wipe it out. The airline industry, for much of its history, was a perfect example of this dynamic. Before deregulation, it was a protected industry. After deregulation, the barriers to entry fell, and dozens of new airlines entered the market, all competing fiercely on price. The result was decades of brutal price wars, terrible customer service, chronically low profitability, and a string of high-profile bankruptcies. It was a terrible industry for investors because the structural dynamics of cutthroat price competition made it nearly impossible for any single company to achieve sustained profitability. This is the world that most entrepreneurs and investors inhabit. They believe that being cheaper is the only way to win. But what they are really doing is entering a game where the prize for winning is a barely profitable, high-stress business, and the penalty for losing is total failure. The psychological toll on the people running these businesses is immense. They live in a state of constant fear. Fear of their competitors, fear of their suppliers, fear of their customers. There is no joy in creation, only the stress of survival. The philosophy of pricing power offers a way out of this trap. It argues that the goal is not to be the cheapest, but to be the one company that has earned the right to be expensive. This right is earned by building a powerful brand, by making your service indispensable, by securing a regulatory moat, or by some other durable advantage that allows you to escape the gravitational pull of price competition. Escaping that pull is the first and most important step toward building a truly great, long-lasting business and a successful investment portfolio. The stark difference between a business built on a cost advantage and one built on true pricing power is written clearly in the language of their financial statements. A sophisticated investor can identify the fragility of a price competitor by looking at a few key line items. Let's return to our tale of two companies. Company A, brand fortress, has pricing power. Company B, cost leader, competes on price. Let's focus on the gross margin, which is revenue minus the cost of goods sold, COGS. As we've established, Brand Fortress has a high and stable gross margin, say 70%. Cost leader, to maintain its low prices, has a very thin gross margin, perhaps 15%. Now, let's analyze the volatility of that margin. Go back and look at the company's financial results for the past 10 years. For Brand Fortress, you will likely see that its gross margin is remarkably consistent. It might fluctuate slightly, but it stays within a tight band, say 68 to 72%. This tells you the business is stable and in control of its pricing. For Cost Leader, the gross margin will likely be all over the place. In years when its raw material costs were low, the margin might have been 20%. In years when those costs spiked, the margin might have collapsed to 5% or even turned negative. This volatility is a huge red flag. It shows that the company's profitability is not determined by its own actions, but by external market forces it cannot control. It is a price taker, not a price maker. Next, look at the capital expenditures, CapEx, on the cash flow statement. This is the money the company spends on plant, property, and equipment. A business competing on cost, like our Dexter shoe example, is often in a capital-intensive industry. It has to constantly spend money on new, more efficient machinery just to keep its cost advantage. You will see high and recurring CapEx figures. Often this CapEx will consume most, if not all, of the company's operating cash flow. They are on a, quote, capital treadmill, spending all their money just to stay in the game. A business with true pricing power, especially one based on an intangible asset like a brand, is often the opposite. See's Candies did not need to constantly invent new chocolate-making technology. Its CapEx was very low. The cash its operations generated was truly free cash flow, available to be distributed to its owner, Berkshire Hathaway. This is the ultimate goal of quality investing, to find businesses that produce vast amounts of free cash flow with minimal need for reinvestment. The Dexter shoe story provides the ultimate financial lesson here. Buffett paid for the company with Berkshire stock. That stock represented a share in a collection of wonderful businesses with immense pricing power: insurance, See's Candies, The Washington Post. He traded a piece of these incredible, capital-light, high-margin businesses for a capital-intensive, low-margin business whose competitive advantage was about to evaporate. It was a catastrophic trade of high-quality assets for low-quality ones. The financial takeaway is this: do not be seduced by a company that is merely efficient. Efficiency is a temporary state. Instead, search for businesses with high, stable, and preferably expanding gross margins and low capital requirements relative to their earnings. This combination is the financial fingerprint of a durable competitive advantage and the true engine of long-term portfolio growth. We have now arrived at the ultimate crucible for any business, the final, unforgiving test that separates the truly great from the merely good. That test is inflation. Inflation is a silent thief that erodes the value of money, savings, and investment returns. For decades, it was a dormant force in the American economy, but when it reawakens, it ruthlessly exposes the strengths and weaknesses of every company in the market. A business with true pricing power doesn't just survive inflation, it thrives in it. A business without pricing power is systematically destroyed by it. This is the final and most important pillar in understanding Warren Buffett's investing philosophy. His 1988 investment in the Coca-Cola Company is the quintessential anecdote of buying a business that was perfectly engineered to triumph over inflation. By the late 1980s, after the painful experience of the high inflation 1970s, Buffett had refined his thinking. He had learned that the very best businesses were those that could increase their profits even when the general purchasing power of the dollar was declining. He began searching for what he called economic royalty. He found it in Coca-Cola. For over $1 billion, Buffett bought a massive stake in the company, making it one of Berkshire's largest holdings. What did he see? He saw a business that was, in many ways, the perfect inflation-proof asset. First, consider the product itself. The physical ingredients in a can of Coke, the sugar, the water, the secret concentrate, the aluminum can, represented a tiny fraction of its retail price. The vast majority of the price a customer paid was for the intangible, the brand, the idea, the feeling associated with the real thing. This is a critical point. When inflation hits, the costs of those physical inputs might rise. The price of sugar might go up 10%, and aluminum might go up 20%. But because these costs are such a small part of the overall price, the impact on Coke's total cost structure is minimal. A 10% increase in input costs might only raise the cost to produce a can of Coke by a single penny. But here is where the magic happens. Because of the power of its brand, Coca-Cola can use the general environment of rising prices as cover to increase the price of that can of Coke by a nickel or a dime. No one questions it. The price of everything is going up, so it seems natural that Coke would too. The result is a massive expansion of the company's profit margin. Their costs went up by a penny, but their revenue went up by a dime. The 9-cent difference is pure incremental profit. Inflation for a company like Coca-Cola is not a headwind. It's a tailwind. It's a gift that allows them to flex their pricing power and increase their real inflation-adjusted earnings. Buffett contrasted this with what he called the terrible businesses to own during inflation. Capital-intensive businesses with no pricing power. Think of a public utility or an airline. During an inflationary period, their costs skyrocket. The utility has to replace its power plants and transmission lines at vastly inflated prices. The airline has to buy new planes and pay more for fuel. But can they simply raise their prices to match? The utility is constrained by government regulators who are slow to approve rate hikes. The airline is constrained by brutal competition. If they raise fares too much, customers will just stop flying. These businesses find their capital being consumed by inflation. They have to run faster and faster, investing billions of dollars of new, more expensive capital just to maintain the same level of service and earning power. Their real inflation-adjusted earnings actually go down. The Coca-Cola investment was a profound demonstration of Buffett's mature investment philosophy. He wasn't just buying a great brand. He was buying an economic fortress, a business perfectly designed to protect and grow his investors, purchasing power in any economic climate. It was the ultimate application of the pricing power principle as the cornerstone of a truly long-term investing strategy. The reason pricing power is such a potent weapon against inflation is rooted in a fascinating set of psychological biases that govern how we perceive value and cost. The primary principle at play is what behavioral scientists call unit cost neglect. When we make small, frequent purchases, our brains don't engage in a rigorous cost-benefit analysis. We operate on habit and heuristics. No one stands in front of a vending machine and calculates the price per ounce of a Coca-Cola versus a Pepsi. The absolute price is so low, $1 or $2, that it falls below our threshold for serious consideration. We just want a Coke. This creates a huge opportunity for the company. They can increase the price by 10 or 15 cents, and this small, incremental change goes largely unnoticed by the consumer. It doesn't trigger the pain of paying in our brains, because the absolute increase is just a few pennies. A 15-cent increase on a $1.50 can of soda is a 10% price hike, a massive increase that would be impossible for a car company or a home builder to pass on. But for Coke, it flies completely under our rational radar. This is magnified by the power of habit formation. Many consumer products, like a morning coffee from Starbucks, a daily can of Coke, or a Gillette razor blade, are deeply embedded in our daily routines. The purchase is almost automatic, triggered by a cue, the time of day, a feeling of thirst, the need to shave. When a behavior is habitual, the conscious, decision-making part of our brain is bypassed. We don't reevaluate the choice every day, we just execute the established pattern. This makes demand for the product incredibly inelastic. The small friction of a minor price increase is not enough to overcome the powerful momentum of the habit. We might vaguely notice the price of our daily latte went up by a quarter, but the effort required to break the habit, find a new coffee shop, and figure out a new order is far greater than the cost of just paying the extra 25 cents. This combination of low unit cost and high habit formation is a recipe for immense pricing power, especially during inflation. A company can implement a series of small, incremental price increases that individually are barely noticeable, but collectively have a dramatic impact on revenue and profitability over time. This is a crucial insight for anyone interested in financial education. The companies that are best protected from inflation are often the ones that sell small, cheap, habit-forming products with world-class brands. It seems counterintuitive. We tend to think of powerful businesses as those that make big, expensive things. But often, the real economic royalty are the masters of the microtransaction, the companies that have successfully embedded their low-cost product into the daily rituals of billions of people. This psychological reality is why a business like Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble can be a far better long-term, inflation-proof investment than a massive industrial company with billions in physical assets. So how can you, as a retail investor, put this all together? How do you stress test your own portfolio or a potential new investment to see if it possesses the inflation-proof characteristics of a company like Coca-Cola? Here is a final, 4-step blueprint, the inflation-proof portfolio audit, designed to help you identify businesses built to win in any economic environment. Step 1 is to analyze the business's capital needs. This is the great divider between the winners and losers during inflation. Ask the question, does this business need to constantly spend huge amounts of money on property, plants, and equipment just to maintain its current level of output? A steel mill, a railroad, or a car manufacturer are classic examples. They have massive physical assets that are constantly wearing out and need to be replaced. During inflation, the cost of these replacements skyrockets. A factory that cost $100 million to build 20 years ago might cost $500 million to replace today. This inflation and replacement costs acts like a giant anchor, consuming all the cash the business generates. A truly wonderful, inflation-proof business is the opposite. It is capital light. Its primary asset is intangible, like the Coca-Cola brand or the Microsoft Windows operating system. These assets don't wear out and don't need to be replaced at inflated prices. They generate cash without consuming it. Step 2 is to analyze the ratio of input costs to retail price. What percentage of the final price the customer pays is made up of raw materials? For a software company, it is close to zero. The cost of producing one more copy of Microsoft Office is negligible. For a company like Coca-Cola, as we've discussed, it's very low. For a company like an airline, it's huge. Fuel can be one of their largest expenses. The lower this ratio, the better the business is protected from inflation. A business with a low input cost ratio can absorb rising commodity prices without a major impact on its profitability. And it has much more room to expand its margins when it raises its own prices. Step 3 is the mental transaction test. This builds on the psychological principles we just discussed. Ask, does the customer have to engage in a significant mental transaction every time they make a purchase? We think long and hard about the price of a new car or a new kitchen. The transaction is large, infrequent, and requires conscious deliberation. We do not think about the price of a pack of gum, a razor blade, or our monthly Netflix subscription. These are low-cost, high-frequency, or automatic purchases. Businesses that operate in this mental transaction-free zone have far more pricing power. They can make small adjustments to their prices that go largely unchallenged by their customers. Look for businesses whose products people buy without really thinking about it. Step 4, and this is for the truly dedicated investor, is to conduct a historical margin analysis during inflationary periods. Don't just take the company's word for it. Verify it with data. Go back to a period of high inflation, like the 1970s or the more recent inflationary spike. Pull up the company's financial statements from that era. Did their gross and net profit margins expand, contract, or stay the same? A company that was able to expand its margins during a past inflationary period is providing you with the strongest possible evidence that it possesses true, durable pricing power. This is advanced stock analysis, but it's the kind of deep work that can give you the confidence to build a portfolio for the long term, one that doesn't just aim to beat the market, but is structured to achieve real financial freedom by protecting and growing your purchasing power through all economic seasons. The antithesis of the inflation-proof business is the one that is perfectly designed to be its victim. It is the capital-intensive business with no pricing power, a combination that guarantees the destruction of shareholder value during a period of rising prices. This is the path of the 99% of industrial and commodity-based businesses, and understanding their plight solidifies the importance of our central thesis. Let's create a clear picture of this financial nightmare. Imagine a company we'll call Struggle Steel Corp. They are in the business of making steel, a classic commodity. They have a massive, aging factory filled with expensive machinery. The business is incredibly capital-intensive. Let's say their factory is worth $1 billion and has a 25-year lifespan. This means that every year they have a maintenance capital expenditure of $40 million, $1 billion divided by 25, just to replace the equipment that is wearing out and keep the factory running. Now, a period of high, sustained inflation at 7% per year begins. Let's look at the devastating 1-2 punch that hits Struggle Steel. Punch 1 is on the cost side. The price of their key inputs, iron ore and coking coal, skyrockets on the global commodity markets. Their energy costs go through the roof. Their unionized labor force demands and gets cost of living pay increases. Their profit margins are immediately crushed because steel is a commodity. They cannot simply pass these costs on to their customers. If they raise their prices above the global market rate for steel, their customers, who are car companies and construction firms, will simply buy their steel from a cheaper producer in Korea or Brazil. They have zero pricing power and are forced to absorb the higher costs. Punch 2 is even more insidious and relates to the capital intensity. That $40 million a year they need to spend to maintain the factory, that's based on old prices. The cost of new machinery is also rising at 7% per year. The real cost of replacing their equipment is now much higher. The depreciation charges on their books, which are based on the original historical cost of the factory, are woefully inadequate. they are under-depreciating their assets. The profits they are reporting on their income statement are a mirage. They look like they are profitable, but in reality, the true economic cost of maintaining their business is eating up all of that reported profit and then some. They are, in effect, liquidating their business without even realizing it. The cash flow is being destroyed. They are trapped. To survive, they have to take on more debt or issue more stock just to fund their maintenance capital expenditures. This dilutes the existing shareholders and puts the company in an even more precarious financial position. This is the fate of capital-intensive, commodity businesses in an inflationary world. They become giant capital consumption machines. Their financial statements become a work of fiction, and the real value of the enterprise slowly bleeds away. The retail investor who looks at the low price-to-earnings ratio of a company like Struggle Steel during inflation and thinks it's a bargain is walking into a classic value trap. They are failing to see that the E in the PE ratio is not real. The true, inflation-adjusted earnings are likely zero or negative. This is why Buffett has always said that the best businesses during inflation are the ones that require no capital at all. It's an extreme statement, but it highlights the core principle. The less capital a business needs to operate, the less it has to lose to the ravages of inflation. The direct financial connection between pricing power and inflation-proofing a portfolio is the most critical concept for achieving long-term financial freedom. It is the quantitative proof that this entire framework is not just a theory, but a practical strategy for wealth creation. Let's solidify this with a final, clear tale of two companies during a sustained period of 10% annual inflation. Company A is brand royalty, our Coca-Cola-like business. It starts with $100 in revenue, and its SOGs are only $20, giving it a gross profit of $80, an 80% margin. It has very few tangible assets, say $40 worth. Company B is capital heavy, our steel mill or airline. It also starts with $100 in revenue, but its COGS are $80, giving it a gross profit of $20, a 20% margin. It has massive tangible assets of $200. Now, the 10% inflation hits. For brand royalty, its input costs go up by 10%. So its COGS increase by $2, 10% of $20, to $22. Because of its immense brand power, it can raise its prices by 10% as well. Its revenue grows to $110. The new gross profit is $110 minus $22 equals $88. Its profit has grown by 10%, perfectly keeping pace with inflation. But now look at its return on assets. Its tangible assets might also inflate in value to $44. It is now earning $88 on a $44 asset base. The return on capital remains astronomically high. The investor's purchasing power has been perfectly preserved. Now look at the disaster unfolding at capital heavy. Its input costs also go up by 10%. Its COGS increase by $8, 10% of $80 to $88. It operates in a competitive industry, so it has no pricing power. It cannot raise its prices by 10%. Maybe it can manage a small 3% price increase. Its revenue inches up to $103. The new gross profit is $103 minus $88 equals $15. Its reported profit has declined by 25% in a world where the cost of living went up by 10%. The investor's wealth has been destroyed in real terms. But it gets worse. Remember its massive $200 asset base? Those assets now cost 10% more to replace. The business now needs to generate $220 in capital just to stand still. But it is only producing $15 in profit. The business is economically insolvent. It is consuming itself. This simple numerical example demonstrates the core truth. During inflation, the earnings of a business with pricing power and low capital needs are real. The earnings of a business with no pricing power and high capital needs are an illusion. This is the single most important lesson in long-term investing. The goal is not just to grow your money, but to grow your purchasing power. Identifying businesses with durable pricing power is the only reliable way to ensure that the wealth you are building is real and lasting, capable of withstanding the inevitable storms of the economic cycle. It is the key to moving beyond simple stock picking and into the realm of true, strategic wealth management. You have just spent this time acquiring a powerful mental tool, a new lens through which to view the entire world of business and investing. You now understand the single most important factor that Warren Buffett looks for: pricing power. You know that the ability of a company to raise its prices year after year without losing its customers is the ultimate sign of a durable, competitive advantage. You can now distinguish the impenetrable fortress of a great brand, the inescapable pull of an indispensable service, and the calm harbor of a regulatory moat from the treacherous, shifting sands of a low-cost advantage. You possess the blueprint to build an inflation-proof portfolio, a shield to protect your capital, and a motor to compound it. But here is the critical truth. Identifying this power is just the first step. A company with immense pricing power can still be a terrible investment if it's run by a destructive management team that squanders its advantages. A wonderful business can destroy your returns if you drastically overpay for its stock. This principle of pricing power does not exist in a vacuum. It is one crucial node in a larger network of interconnected mental models that constitute a complete system for intelligent investing. The video that is now appearing on your screen is the next piece of that map. It is the vital link that connects the what with the when. It addresses the other side of the coin: how to properly value these incredible businesses to ensure that you don't turn a great company into a poor investment. It bridges the gap between identifying competitive advantage and exercising the discipline to pay the right price. The average viewer might stop here, content with this one powerful idea. But you have invested this much time because you are not average. You are building a complete mental arsenal. Understanding one part of the system is good, but mastering the entire framework is what separates the lifelong amateur from the disciplined, successful wealth builder. Your journey of ascent is not over. The next link in the chain is right in front of you. Prove to yourself that you are committed to completing the system. Continue your mastery. Click the video.